I raised her son for 6 years. Then she told me he was never mine. My name is Mark. I'm 36. And up until recently, I thought I was the father of a 6-year-old boy named Liam. I met Jessica when I was 28 and she was 26. We were introduced at a friend's housewarming party, one of those late summer rooftop gatherings where the food is mediocre, but the alcohol is free-flowing. She was charismatic, sharp-witted, and striking without trying too hard. I wasn't looking for anything serious at the time, but she stuck. She had that presence, magnetic, unpredictable. We started dating casually, but things escalated quickly. Within 6 months, we were spending nearly every night together. A year in, we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment just outside Seattle. It felt like the right step. We weren't flashy, weren't particularly romantic, but we made a good team. She worked in marketing, I worked in IT consulting. We split bills, alternated dinner duty, and didn't fight much. When Jessica found out she was pregnant, she cried. Not tears of joy, panic. I remember her sitting on the edge of the bathtub holding the positive test, mumbling, "This is going to ruin everything." I stood there with my own brand of stunned silence. But eventually, I told her what I genuinely felt. Maybe it wasn't the plan, but maybe it was okay. I told her I'd be there. Over the next several months, I watched her morph into a stranger. She was more irritable, more withdrawn, almost hostile at times. I assumed it was hormones. She blamed stress. We kept going. Liam was born on a rainy Thursday morning in January. The second I held him, I felt something click in my chest, a kind of instinctive bond I couldn't describe. I didn't see my features in his, but he had Jessica's nose, her eyes, her dark hair. I didn't think twice about it. We weren't married. Jessica had always said she didn't believe in it. "It's just paper," she'd shrug. "It doesn't change anything." I went along with it. At the time, it didn't feel like a red flag. We lived like a married couple anyway, raising a child, sharing a life. I took fatherhood seriously. I was there for every first. First steps, first words, first fever. I did school drop-offs, stayed up during sleep regressions, read Goodnight Moon until I had it memorized. He called me Daddy before he ever said Mommy. From the outside, we looked like a family. Inside, things between Jess and I were slowly dying. We barely touched each other, rarely spoke unless it was about Liam. She was always on her phone, always busy. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't want to look too closely. I thought if I just focused on being a good dad, the rest would fall into place. I was wrong, and that blind hope would cost me more than I ever imagined. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, quiet, almost unnoticeable, like a floorboard that creaks for weeks before finally snapping beneath your feet. It started with a question. One night while I was tucking Liam into bed, he looked up at me and said, "Daddy, how come Mommy never hugs you?" I paused. My hands froze mid-blanket tuck. I smiled and said something harmless. "Grown-ups are just busy sometimes, buddy." But the question stayed lodged in my brain like a splinter. He wasn't wrong. Jessica hadn't hugged me in months. She barely looked at me unless it was through the lens of irritation. We coexisted. She was either working late, sleeping, or scrolling on her phone. I handled most of the parenting. Morning routines, bath times, storybooks, lunch packing. Those were mine. I didn't resent it. It made me feel like I had a purpose. But something had changed in her. She stopped caring if I noticed her lies. She wasn't even trying to hide them anymore. One night she came home at 1:30 a.m. I was awake, sitting in the living room with the lights off. She didn't expect to see me. She froze at the doorway, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. "Late night at the office?" I asked. Voice calm. Too calm. She dropped her purse, took off her heels and muttered, "Don't start this again." Mark, I didn't push. I'd asked before, and every time I did, she flipped it on me. Accused me of being insecure, controlling, paranoid. And like an idiot, I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to fight. Fighting would have made it real. A few days later, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally it was face down, password protected. But this time it was open, careless, as if she assumed I'd given up. Maybe I had, but not that night. The message was from someone named Ethan. It read, "Can't stop thinking about Sunday. You wore me out." I didn't react at first. I just stared at it. Then I opened the message thread. Dozens of texts, photos, voice notes, conversations laced with familiarity and lust. They'd been seeing each other for at least 6 months, possibly longer. But what broke me wasn't the affair. It was a message from 2 months ago that read, "He still thinks Liam is his. I don't have the heart or the balls to tell him the truth. You were a mistake, but he's been convenient." I reread that message at least 10 times. My mind refused to connect the dots. Still thinks Liam is his? Convenient? I didn't confront her that night. I needed to be sure. The next morning, while Liam was at school and Jess was working from home, I stood in the kitchen and asked her directly, "Is Liam my son?" She didn't blink, didn't even try to lie. She said, "No, he's not. I figured you knew by now." Just like that. 12 words. Delivered like a grocery list. No guilt, no hesitation. Like I'd asked her what time it was. I stood there, staring at the woman I'd lived with for nearly a decade. The woman I thought was the mother of my child. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged. "You wanted to be a dad. You were already in too deep. What difference did it make?" I felt something inside me snap. Quietly, cleanly, like glass under pressure. That night, I slept on the couch. Not out of spite. I just couldn't share a bed with her. I didn't want to breathe the same air. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how much of my life had been a lie. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. 6 years of fatherhood, reduced to a joke I wasn't in on. And she didn't even flinch. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there in complete stillness. "You let me raise a child that wasn't mine. For 6 years, she shrugged. You wanted a family. I gave you one." I laughed. Just once, short and bitter. "You're unbelievable." She rolled her eyes. "Spare me the drama, Mark. You're not the first guy to raise another man's kid." I packed a bag that night. Stayed in a hotel. I didn't even say goodbye to Liam. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself not to fall apart in front of him. Over the next few days, I got a paternity test. I had to know. The results came back, and, just like she said, 0.0% match. Not even a sliver of doubt. I contacted a lawyer. It turns out I had no parental rights. Liam wasn't mine biologically, and because Jess and I were never married, I had no legal claim to custody or visitation. I was erased from his life overnight. The worst part? Jess didn't fight it. She didn't try to keep the peace for Liam's sake. She just let it happen. "You wanted out. Now you're out." I sank into a kind of numbness I didn't know existed. I didn't go to work. I ignored calls from friends. I sat in that hotel room and stared at the ceiling for hours. But then I got a voicemail. From Liam. Probably recorded on an old phone he had access to. Just a minute-long ramble about school, his drawings, how he missed pancake Sundays. "I miss you, Daddy. I love you." I broke. I sat on the floor and cried harder than I ever had in my life. But even that wasn't enough to change anything. Legally, I had no right to respond. I was just some guy who lived in his house once. I told, "My family first." My mother sobbed. My sister offered to slash her tires. And I think she meant it. My father, usually stoic, put a hand on my shoulder and just said, "You love that boy. That counts for something." Friends were split. Some said I should have seen the red flags. Some called me a saint for staying as long as I did. A few admitted they'd always thought Liam looked nothing like me but didn't want to say anything. And Jess? She moved on like it was nothing. I heard from a friend that she and Ethan moved in together. Liam now calls him Daddy. I couldn't even get angry anymore. I was hollow. But then something unexpected happened. Liam's school reached out. Apparently, I was still listed as an emergency contact. They hadn't been informed of the change. One of the teachers, who'd seen me at every parent-teacher conference, sent a discreet message to my work email. "Liam's been quieter lately. Withdrawn. He asked where you were." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The legal system doesn't care about emotional bonds. It cares about blood and paperwork. And I had neither. People ask if I'd do it again. If I knew from the start Liam wasn't mine, would I have still raised him? Yes. God help me, yes. Because none of this was his fault. He was a child who loved me, and I loved him. Still do. But I wouldn't wish that heartbreak on anyone. It's been 9 months. I've changed jobs, moved cities. I see a therapist twice a month. I'm not healed, and I don't know if I ever will be. But I function now. I've learned to accept what I cannot change. The hardest part is pretending Liam never existed when the world requires it. There's no space for grief when the person you lost is technically not yours. There's no funeral, no closure. Just a silence everyone expects you to carry with you. I keep a photo of him, just one. Us on the couch, him asleep on my chest, his hand in mine. It reminds me I was a father, even if only temporarily. Sometimes I still hear his voice. The way he said "Dada" when he was scared. The way he giggled when I did the dinosaur voice. It's a kind of ghost you carry inside you, always. I don't hate Jess. Not anymore. What's the point? Hate doesn't change what happened. It doesn't bring Liam back into my life. But I do pity her. Because she'll never know what it means to be loved unconditionally. She used Liam like a pawn. And in doing so, destroyed something beautiful. I've started volunteering with a local mentorship program. I work with kids who need a positive male figure in their lives. It's not the same, but it helps. And maybe that's enough. If I could say one thing to Liam, it would be this. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sorry. I had to leave. But you'll always be my son in my heart. Because love doesn't always follow biology. Sometimes it just shows up, stays a while, and leaves a scar that never fades. But I wouldn't trade those 6 years for anything. Not even now.